Good morning and welcome to this first Sunday after Easter, or what we otherwise call the second Sunday of Easter. Today for us as Western Christians is the Sunday after Easter Sunday, but for Orthodox Christians who celebrate around the world, they celebrate Easter today. And so we say Christos Anesti to all Orthodox Christians who are celebrating the risen Christ today. May he rise again in your hearts, as he did 2,000 years ago. One of the disadvantages of being, as I have been, an assistant priest, and before that a deacon, and before that a lay minister, is that you very seldom get to preach on Easter Sunday. In fact, I don't think I've ever preached a service on an Easter Sunday. But one of the advantages of being an assistant is that you usually get to preach on the Sunday after Easter today. And that's because the priest or the rector, the priest in charge, usually feels a bit tired after all the Easter services they feel that they've done. And on the first Sunday after Easter, we always read the passage towards the end of John's Gospel, chapter 20, about Thomas. And I must say, I've preached about Thomas now quite several times during my preaching career. And I must say that he is, for me, I think sort of my hero of all the human beings in the Bible. He is the person that I look up to and admire and appreciate and model myself on, or see myself in the most. We call Thomas Doubting Thomas, and I always think that that's such an unfair label to give to this man. He doesn't doubt Jesus. He doubts his friends. He doubts the disciples. Essentially, he says to them, I am not willing to take your word for it that you have seen the risen Christ. I want to see him for myself. I don't want second-hand faith that gets handed down from you that I must just blindly accept. I want to see him, and I want to touch him. I want to have my own first-hand knowledge of Jesus as the risen Messiah. And I love that about Thomas. I love that he is not willing just to accept blindly and without thinking and without really knowing that Jesus has risen from the dead. He wants to see for himself, and he wants to grab hold of Jesus and touch him and to truly know that he has risen from the dead. And I look at that and I think, that is faith. That's not doubt. That's Thomas searching to have an authentic relationship with the risen Christ. Well, I'm a bit of a fan. What can I say? I really like Thomas. What strikes me about Thomas is that when Jesus does appear to him and then invites him and says, here, look at my hands, see the holes, put your finger in there, and look at my side and put your hand in the side where the spear was, Thomas doesn't actually touch Jesus. He simply falls on his face, and in a way like the angels do, he covers his eyes with his hands and he says, my Lord and my God. Having seen Jesus and Jesus responding to his expression of faith, Thomas, almost more than any of the other disciples, recognizes the Godship of Jesus Christ. I love that story. But today, I must say, as I've been preparing for today, thinking like, what else can I say about Thomas? I began thinking about Job, and I must say I've never thought about Job in the context of Thomas before. But Job, in a way, describes quite a similar story, and I want to just remind you a little bit about Job. Job, of course, had everything. Life was really great. And then, in a way, he experienced a lockdown. God or Satan or the two of them together conspired to lock Job down. And so he lost everything. He lost everything, all his money, all of his possessions, all of his family, his friends, his reputation, his health, his well-being. He lost it all. And he found himself sitting on the ash heap. And then a couple of his friends come. And for a while, they are true friends. They sit with him on the ash heap and they grieve with him. They cover their head in ashes and they tear their clothes and they sit with him in silence for a few days, in in companionship and in solidarity with him. And after that, a few chapters into the book of Job, begins a long interaction between Job and his friends, who essentially try to persuade him that he must have done something wrong to bring about this bad outcome, and that he needed to repent and turn to God for forgiveness. And Job is insistent that he is a righteous man, and that he has not done anything to bring about his misfortune. And they go on and on and on. And I can almost guarantee you, bet you, that you've never read the whole of Job. I must say I've tried, and I've actually not managed. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And Job's friends at the end of chapter 37 say this: "The Lord Almighty is beyond our reach, exalted in power. In his justice and great righteousness, he does not oppress. Therefore people revere him, for does he not have regard for all the wise in heart?" And after all of this hot air that Job's friends have been shouting about who God is and about why Job needs to repent, God, in chapter 38, finally appears himself. And chapter 38 starts like this: "Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. He said, 'Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me.'" And then he spends the next 2 chapters telling Job about everything that he has done from the beginning of creation. He, in a sense, presents his credentials to Job. He hears Job's call, and he comes in person and he presents himself to Job in the same way that Jesus presented his hands and showed the stigmata. God presents himself to Job and gives him his credentials. He speaks to him about all the things that he has done. In verse 4, for example, he says, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand." And he works from there all the way through the whole of creation, showing Job that he is indeed the Lord, the God. And after 4 chapters of God presenting his CV to Job, Job finally says in the very last chapter, chapter 42, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, 'Who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge?' Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, 'Listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me.' My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. I have heard of you, but now my eyes have actually seen you." And in response to that, Job says in verse 6, "Therefore I despise myself and repent in ashes and dust." There's such a lovely similarity between these 2 stories of 2 men who were grappling with faith and who really wanted to encounter God and ask him questions. And then God presents himself. For Job, it was God the Father. And for Thomas, it was God the Son. God presents himself and presents his CV and says, "This is who I am." And immediately, both these men respond in faith and cover their eyes and say, "You are the Lord." Dear friends, particularly now in the wake of Easter, I want to encourage you to have a faith that seeks and asks questions, that doesn't just take things for granted, that is willing to grapple with doubt and uncertainty, to ask difficult questions for which there may be no good answers. But in all of this, to be asking to see God with your own eyes and to touch him with your own hands, because God really wants to meet each of us in this kind of way. This is what he does. We have all of these examples in the scriptures of God coming to engage with his people when we seek him with an open, questioning heart. don't let doubt draw you away from God. Rather, let doubt push you towards God. And in that process, God will meet you. Let us pray together the collect set for this Sunday. God of mission, you raised Jesus Christ as the firstborn of the dead. By your Holy Spirit, empower us to be witnesses to him, so that those who have not yet seen him may come to believe in him who was and who is to come, and who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.